Hi guys. Today we are going to talk about a pretty big topic. We are going to talk about ableism. Now, ableism is it's aimed toward disabled people. Ableism comes in many forms. It can be very subtle. Ableism impacts not only disabled people's lives, but also able-bodied people. And I don't think that, I'm going to preface this by saying I don't think that people always realize what they're saying is ableist and kind of awful when they say them. A lot of times it goes hand in hand with good intention. But so ableism, right? Ableism and children. When I was younger, I was raised in an environment that was not accessible to me. I was raised in a very small village. I was one of the few disabled children, and I was put in a different category because I could walk on crutches. I went to physical therapy. I worked very hard to maintain what little bits of walking I could do. And when I was very young, I could walk very long distances with crutches. I started out on a walker, and I don't even remember what age I was. I think maybe second grade. I transitioned to crutches, and it was a very long and painful process. But here's the thing. As I grew older, I didn't understand why I needed to be on these crutches. I didn't understand why I couldn't just use my wheelchair. I couldn't understand. The response to that was, well, you don't want to lose what function you have. You don't want to be lazy, which is my favorite thing. That wheelchairs are equated to laziness. I can tell you that it's not. I can tell you that, and I try not to bring a lot of emphasis on this. I have spina bifida. Spina bifida is not one of those disabilities that typically changes drastically. However, it is a thing in our community, in the spina bifida community, that parents, good-intentioned parents, push their children to walk, to physically exhaust themselves, and eventually tear up their muscles so much that when they get to a grown-up age, their late 30s, 40s, they begin to have to rely on the wheelchair because their muscle abilities are not there anymore. They've torn up their ligaments, they're torn up their muscles, and frankly, they cannot, no matter with any degree of physical therapy or effort, will not be able to maintain that life. And the frustrating part of all of it is that wheelchairs aren't shameful. Wheelchairs don't mean that you're giving up. A wheelchair is a tool that you use to be able to get around. Wheelchairs are, for me, it's equal to my legs. Wheelchairs give me the ability to get from place to place. If I did not have my wheelchair, I would be bedbound. I would literally be bedbound. I would be stuck. I would be more disabled than I am. And I didn't have the words or the knowledge when I was younger to be able to convey that. I didn't have the ability to explain why it was not shameful that I should want to use my chair for more of the time. And what I was faced with was chiding, basically, of, well, if you use your wheelchair all the time, you're going to get fatter. If you use your wheelchair all the time, you're just going to get lazy. You don't want to be lazy. I mean, you have to put some effort in. What are you going to do? Not everywhere you're going is going to be wheelchair accessible. And that's the thing. That part was right. Not everywhere I go is wheelchair accessible. But is that my fault? No. That is not my fault. That is society's fault. And so um I grew up thinking that I was lesser. I grew up thinking that if I only tried hard enough, that I wouldn't have a disability anymore, that I wouldn't be any different than anyone else. And frankly, that's kind of boring. So, 10-year-old me, you kind of sucked and you were boring. I, along with all of that coming from my parents, coming from my family, it was also treated like I was delicate. I'm still treated like I'm delicate, frankly. I'm not. I can go through quite a bit and be perfectly fine. Um, I I acknowledge that this is just a family thing, frankly. Grandmothers and mothers are always going to worry. Um, but it was very interesting to have one side of everyone in my family saying, okay, you got to do what you got to do your best, try harder, get out of the wheelchair. I'm so proud of you for walking so far and all this stuff. Then you've got a completely different side, and they're like, oh, don't do too much, don't push too hard, you're gonna strain yourself out. Let's get you into a cozy chair. Do we see how that's confusing? Do we see how there's a contradiction there? We want you to try real hard and be a super crip and do this and do that, but at the same time, don't push too hard because you don't want to stress yourself out and end up in the hospital. What? First of all, first of all, the first 10 years of my life, 10 to 12 years, was all about hospitals anyway. But frankly, it was going to happen regardless just because of the medical complexity that's going on within my body. Once I started to not care anymore, um, I started to take more control over my own life. Um, and that's really started taking off my braces and not wearing them quite as much was the most freeing experience I can ever tell you. Now, was it a good idea long term? Nope. No, it wasn't. It was not a good idea. Um, like a wheelchair, braces and crutches are another tool that people can use that provides just a little bit more mobility, a little bit easier of a life. Because then all of a sudden you can get places that a wheelchair can't. Am I shaming anybody who uses a wheelchair full time? Nope, I do now. I would never do that. Am I shaming anyone who uses crutches? Nope, I'm not doing that either. I'm saying that you have to make the right decision for your life. Do not let your inner ableism tell you that you are a lesser person because you use a wheelchair now. Do not let your inner ableism tell you that you are not a person at all because you used to be able bodied and now you're not. Because frankly, this is one of the hardest challenges that someone has to go through when they, for instance, have a horrible accident. Now, I would never wish an accident on anyone. I would never wish harm on anyone. I am a Wiccan. I try to put as much good into the world as I can. However, becoming disabled is not the worst thing that's ever going to happen to you. It's not. There are people all over this great world who are disabled, living great lives, and they're happy. The time when it initially happens is a terrible time in people's lives because they have to accept that. They have to accept that their life has changed and they have to figure out a way to adapt and go on. It's not the worst thing that's ever happened, though. I promise you. There are ways, there are things you can do, there are people you can talk to, there are people that you can yell at when you're just angry. Because I get it, you're angry at the world because something has been taken from you, but I promise you it hasn't. It has not been taken from you. It's just been changed. Your life plan has changed, and it's scary. My life plan has changed several times in my life, and I was born with a disability. It's scary. Any change is scary. But this is not the time to let your inner ableism come in and tell you all the ways where you are a terrible person and you suck and you don't deserve to be alive. It's not. This is the time where you say, okay, this is what I have. This is the resources that I have that I can use. And these are the people that I can talk to when life is really hard. Because that's the key. When you go through any kind of serious change in your life, if you have to have some kind of a support system. You have to. And it does not have to be anybody in your family because frankly, family is going to be the hardest people to talk to when you're going through something. And the reason is, well-intentioned, they're not going to be able to give you good advice. They're not going to be able to tell you the things that you need to hear. So I love families. I think they're great. But in these situations, I would much rather talk to another disabled person because they will never have these same experiences that we do. I love my community. It was the most freeing thing when I really started to accept my disability, to know that there were other people. And I think back to my youth and how I was othered because I had more ability than those other kids in special ed. Those other children who my family felt didn't have a future, didn't have what I had, so their lives weren't going to be great. And we know what kinds of children I'm talking about. And that's kind of embarrassing. So what I'm doing and what I would ask of you is reach out to young disabled children if you are a person with a disability. And if you're not, reach out to them. And if you are disabled, tell them about your life. Tell them about how things might seem difficult now and they might seem impossible, but this is how you've grown up. This is what you are able to do now because you know now that disability isn't bad. If you have a connection with teachers in your community, talk to the classes. Talk to them about all of these things. Talk to them about really cool disability role models in the community. If you don't know any, reach out. I'd be happy to send you all of the really cool people that I know or that I know of. There's so many disabled people throughout history that you don't even realize had a disability, and they were boss. Don't use phrases like, well, don't let disability stop you. My disability doesn't stop me from doing anything, frankly. There's a will, there's a way, my friend. And I know in your head, you're probably coming up with like a billion things that you think a person in a wheelchair couldn't do. Have you ever heard of adaptive equipment, my friend? Because there's ways. I'm in fact working with my local community right now on having accessible go-karts because, frankly, I want to shame the 8-year-old I live with and win a game of go-kart with him, against him. So that's just the tip of the iceberg here. When it comes to ableism, it comes in a lot of forms, and I will possibly do a video in the future about dating and ableism. But for now, just generally, think about your interactions. Think about the Facebook posts you post or that you liked or whatever. A really good example of ableism is I've seen it become more popular lately where you have disabled people in pictures, they're memes, and it says something like, I bet people won't like my picture, blah, blah, blah. First of all, if you do a little digging, you will find that the original picture that was posted was not that meme. That original post or picture that was posted was from this person's Facebook account, and they were actually proud of themselves for ABC reason. Maybe they're just actually going to prom and they were posting a picture of them in their dress just like any other person would. And then someone came in and thought, oh, that's so inspirational. And they took that picture and they put it up on Facebook and they just did it to get likes. That is so douchey, guys. That is so rude. I try very hard not to post pictures of myself in the internet because I'm afraid that the exact same thing is going to happen. And recently, I had completed a 5K race, and I was terrified that people were going to take a picture of me and post it on the Facebook and talk about how inspirational I was. Now, mind you, in that situation, I was actually being a super crip. Not everybody can complete a 5K. And I worked really hard. And I was very proud of myself. I was terrified that somebody was going to take that picture and do what they will with it. And while I was so worried about myself, my friend who had just completed a half marathon had her own issue where she's also in a wheelchair, and she had a video taken of her working with her boyfriend who was also in a wheelchair, going up this very steep hill, very hard hill. And they were working real hard, and he was just encouraging her. And of course, people posted that on Facebook without linking her or anything, but just talking about how inspirational that was and how hard it must have been for her because she's in a wheelchair and all this really horrible crap. Not only does that belittle the work that she actually did, but that wasn't any different than any of the other people who were in the marathon with her. There were other people in that marathon with her, and they didn't have their videos taken. And with mind you, this was without her knowledge. So when she saw that, she was mortified. It's not okay to take video or pictures of people doing things that you think is inspirational and putting it on social media. It's not okay. This goes for something where someone's being a super crip. This goes for people who are just doing things like going to the grocery store or eating in a restaurant. It's not okay to invade people's privacy. And so I hope that what you take from this video is that we're all people. I'm not anything more than what I am. I'm not that special. And I know people are gonna be like, oh, your self-esteem's terrible. It is, but that has nothing to do with it. It's nothing to do with it. I'm not more special than you. You're not more special than me. I'm just a person in a wheelchair just trying to live my life. So I appreciate you sticking in for this video. I know that my videos tend to be a little bit longer. I'm not good at editing. And so here we are. But thank you. Please like, share, subscribe. I love talking to people about disability. So I hope you stick around.